Oh, hello YouTube. Today in the Naughty Librarian, we are continuing on my James Bond read-along series, and today we are going over Diamonds Are Forever by Ian Fleming. I think Diamonds Are Forever is a sleeper hit of the series. I don't think a lot of people agree with me, but I don't care. I really enjoy reading this one. It's very action-packed, and it's about a diamond smuggling ring. Like, that's pure spy shit. Like, I love it. So let's just get into what happened in this book. First things first, we're gonna start off with the yikes factor here because yikes, these books have a lot of problematic content in them. It's basically racism to everybody. Like, oh my word, am I disappointed in James in this book just being horribly racist to so many different types of people. Italians, BIPOC people, LGBTQ people, there's just a lot. And as much as I find James to be a very interesting character, he's just a product of his era and his times, and he doesn't see anything wrong with the fact that he says racist shit, which is a problem. Like, let's be real. And even if it was common in that era and like he's a product of that era, it still doesn't make it okay that he's being racist all the time. Like, it's definitely a problematic element of this one. However, in more evolving type of yikes factor here, as racist as James could sound at times, he's actually a little bit surprisingly feminist too, which is bizarre. Like, how are you feminist but also racist? So progress, I guess, considering in the beginning 2 books of this series it was yikes for misogyny, and then starting with the previous book Moonraker and Galabrand, after that point all of the heroines in his books become much more essential characters in the story and not just like a thing with boobs for James to look at. So, you know, 1 step forward, 1 step back, I guess. It's just kind of how it is with a lot of books, especially like books in this era. So we're just gonna move past that and get into what actually happened in the plot. The Diamonds Are Forever, like I mentioned earlier, is pretty obviously about a diamond smuggling ring. And in the time period this book is taking place, like 1953, 1954 era, Britain still had a lot of colonies in Africa, especially like Sierra Leone, where the diamond industry is their biggest industry. So the British people are basically, you know, we're not going to get into the horrors of the diamond industry for this video because frankly that's a long story. But the British government isn't, you know, concerned with their crimes against humanity. They're concerned mainly that about $2 million worth of diamonds get smuggled out of Africa every year, and they're not seeing the profits for that. And like, spoiler alert, this diamond smuggling ring is being kind of run by the American mafia. And they have like a whole system in place. There's like a dentist at the diamond mines and he smuggles the diamonds out, and like it's a whole thing. And James gets pulled into this situation for exactly that reason, to stop the diamond smuggling ring. And so, you know, the British government stops losing profits. Yikes, capitalism. So James gets debriefed by M, and basically they say, hey, James, we need you to impersonate a guy named Peter Franks. And Peter Franks is currently the guy who's smuggling the diamonds out of England right now. And they've set it up that Peter Franks is going to get arrested. Scotland Yard is going to hold him, and James will just swoop in, grab the diamonds, take his place. And then they want James to literally smuggle the diamonds into America, to follow the pipeline back to its source. Where does it start? Let's try to, you know, shut down this diamond smuggling pipeline. So James goes over to Scotland Yard. He meets back up with Valance, who we were introduced to in Moonraker as like the chief detective there, and he kind of fills James in on like what they have for the case so far. And they tell him that like the smuggler person in England changes each time to avoid, you know, someone getting caught and having too much information. So this time they had good intel that it was Peter Franks, and they know that Peter Franks is supposed to meet up with his contact, which is a woman named Tiffany Case. And then Tiffany Case is supposed to escort Peter Franks to America with the diamonds. But in the meantime, since they're waiting for the rendezvous to happen, they're sending James over to the House of Diamonds to do some investigating. And the House of Diamonds is like, you know, a diamond exporter, importer. And the guy running it is an American guy named Rufus Say. And the ministry is pretty sure that Rufus Say and the House of Diamonds is part of the diamond smuggling problem. And like, funny side note here, they can't just send James into the House of Diamonds looking like James. Mind you, he's supposed to be Peter Franks. Like, why would Peter Franks show up there? So like, he has a full makeover montage. So James gets to wear a disguise. He has like a, you know, an old beard. They make his hair a little bit white and stuff, you know, maybe glasses. He gets to have a spy disguise done by the police, and it made me laugh. So James and another detective, they go over to the House of Diamonds on the ruse of asking Rufus Say for his opinion on some diamonds that were stolen. And Rufus Say looks super out of place in the House of Diamonds. He's basically just like a big hulking guy, like think like stereotypical mobster. Like that's what Rufus Say looks like. Detective starts asking him some questions like, oh, we have these missing diamonds. It's like this amount of this type of diamond and that amount of that type of diamond. He just starts listing off different kinds of diamonds. And Rufus is like, I haven't seen any of them, blah, I'm leaving. And he just leaves. So he just kind of blows off the detectives. But the detective's just like, all right, he just folds up his little notebook and he leaves. And James is like, we got nothing. What's going on here? And the detective is like, bro, I named made up diamonds and he didn't know they were made up. Like, he's obviously part of the ring. He doesn't know shit about diamonds. So while there's no real concrete evidence here that the House of Diamond is smuggling diamonds, it seems likely at this point. So now that they have established kind of the start of the pipeline, at least in England, they can move on with the rest of the investigation here. So later that night, James goes to meet up with Tiffany Case in her hotel room. And immediately, James is rather taken with Tiffany. He thinks she's real fascinating. Mind you, she's super hot and in literally her underwear when he meets her. So like, wonder why. But besides, you know, boobs, like there's also a mysterious kind of world-weary aspect to her that James kind of like resonates with. But back to the whole point of the meeting here, she's coordinating how James particularly can smuggle the diamonds into the US because everybody is different. She's like, what hobbies do you have? And James is like, well, I play golf. And she's like, great, we're gonna shove the diamonds in some fake golf balls. No one at customs gonna check your golf balls. And you know, they talk more about like specifics of like how this is gonna run. So now that everything's figured out, like Tiffany escorts them out the door and James is like, hey, when we're in New York, why don't I take you out to dinner? Like, we could go to dinner. And Tiffany is surprised that he asked her on a date, but she also kind of casually, easy breezy is like, yeah, sure, maybe. And after he gets his yes, James leaves. Tiffany, she calls her contact, who's called ABC, and they start getting together all of the stuff that James is gonna need for, you know, to smuggle the diamonds into America. And James goes back to the office and he goes to Q Branch and he gets a bunch of his little doodads he needs for the mission. So everybody's getting shit prepared. So while James is waiting for the car to come get him to take him to the airport, he gets like an urgent message from M, and it gives him a little bit more information that they've just found out about the case. So apparently Rufus Say of the House of Diamonds is actually Jack Spang, and he and his brother Serafimo Spang are the leaders of the Spangled Mob in America, which is apparently like a major outfit. And M orders James that if the case leads him to have dangerous contact with the Spangled Mob, he's to turn the case over to the FBI immediately and like cease and desist, essentially. And obviously James is like, fuck that noise. Like, what do you mean by dangerous contact? That seems very vague. Like, there's no way James is ever going to turn over this case. But on that note, the car comes and picks him up. James gets in, he goes to the airport, he gets on his flight with, you know, his new golf clubs and golf balls, etc. And everything goes really smoothly. He just gets on his plane, he goes over to America in the plane, and nothing weird happens. It's just a very casual plane flight. So he lands in New York, he gets picked up again in another car. They take him over to the next stop in the pipeline, which is a guy named Shady Tree. So he gets to Shady's place, and Shady, he takes the golf balls, he gets all the diamonds out of the golf balls. Everything is still going very according to plan. Everything's running very smoothly. But James, he brings up payment because Peter Franks was supposed to be paid $5,000 to smuggle the diamonds. So this is where things kind of get interesting and like mobby, because Shady Tree gives James $1,000 because that's like a reasonable amount of money. It's like, oh yeah, remember we met each other when we were in the war, and like I owed you $500 and then we played some cards, and then like I owed you 500 more, so here's like 1,000, right? Like they're coming up with this like plan, because it'd be really weird for like a British guy to all of a sudden have $5,000 in American currency. So part 2 of the payment scheme here is James is supposed to take that $1,000 and go over to the racetrack in Saratoga, New York. And on Tuesday, he's supposed to bet on a very particular horse in a very particular race, and the winnings will pay out 5 times the amount, and that'll be his $5,000. Because that's all above board. It's like, oh, I had $1,000, I got it from my friend, and we were playing cards, and then I bet on a horse and I won the money. Like, this is a perfectly legitimate reason why this guy would have $5,000 all of a sudden. So there's like other crimes happening at the same time here. They're smuggling the diamonds, they're fixing horse races, there's a lot. It's the mob. They have many different tentacles of what they're doing and different things. And since James has a few days to kill, like it's Saturday when he lands in the States, and now he has to wait till Tuesday to get his money, so he's just kind of wandering around New York for a bit. And then his like spidey sense starts tingling. He's like, someone's following me. I can't see who's following me. Like, I don't see anyone suspicious, but I know I'm being followed. And James is right. Someone is following him, because eventually someone comes up behind him, grabs his arm with like a hook hand. This is a clue. And then like shoves something into like his back. Is like, hey, do you want to get full of lead? And it was like, you know, very stereotypical like gangstery type of stuff. And James doesn't know who grabbed him. It could have been like law enforcement, it could have been someone from the mob, but James doesn't have a flight response. He only has fight responses. So he turns around to start throwing a punch, and then the guy behind him catches his punch, like catches it. And guess who it is, everybody? It's Felix Leiter, James's bestie. We haven't seen Felix since book 2, Live and Let Die, where he literally got eaten by a shark a little bit. So he's lost an arm and a leg. And Felix is kind of like the American version of James Bond, and like they're friends, and Felix is like, I got you, buddy. Like they're just totally being broy with each other, and I love their friendship. And they're excited that they're back together again, so they go out to lunch to like catch up. And we find out Felix has retired from the CIA. You know, he lost his gun hand. Like the CIA was just gonna put him on desk duty, and he's like, no thank you. So he retired from the CIA and he joined up with the Pinkertons, which is a very famous detective agency. They go back to like the Lincoln era in the United States. I'm not sure if they still exist today, but apparently they did in the 1950s at least. And right now, in particular, Felix is on a case about, you know, doping horses, fixing horse races, etc. So his case is kind of overlapping with James's case right now. So James tells Felix a little bit about his case, since they're kind of on the same case at the moment. And he mentions Tiffany Case and how he's like kind of into her. And Felix happens to know shit about Tiffany Case. She's like a known part of the Spangled Mob. And TLDR on Tiffany Case, basically her mother ran a brothel in San Francisco, and then she didn't pay off the mob one time, and so the local mob broke in to her brothel, and they all assaulted Tiffany in retribution when Tiffany was like 16 years old. So brutally gang assaulted. So yikes. She ran away shortly after that. I don't blame her. And then basically she just kind of drifted around for several years, basically just trying to drink herself to death. She was just a full-blown alcoholic. And then a few years after, you know, that event, she's in like Florida, and she sees a little boy who's like drowning. So she jumps in after him and like saves this little boy, and it like got her like media attention. And this rich lady kind of just like adopts her, like takes her under her wing. She puts her in rehab. Tiffany gets like clean, And things go okay for a little bit, but eventually she kind of just goes back to her criminal ways because she's been so used to living that lifestyle for so long. She doesn't really know how to live a different lifestyle. And that leads her to get involved with the Spangled Mob and be part of this diamond smuggling ring. But back to the case at hand here, James and Felix decide they're gonna secretly work together on both their cases. And he and Felix make plans to like head up to Saratoga together. They're gonna have a boys' road trip. It's gonna be really cute. So they make plans. Felix will come pick them up tomorrow. In the meantime, they just kind of part ways again. But that night, James still has his date with Tiffany to go to. So he goes out with Tiffany, and you know, there's definitely chemistry between them, and there's definitely attraction. But James, he's actually really hesitant to like push the matter further. He's like, oh, this woman has been hurt before. She hasn't told me that. She doesn't know I know that. But like, I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt her. And if I'm too forward, it might scare her. Like, he's taking her feelings into account here rather than this like, no, I need to get laid right now. And besides like just her feelings, he also thinks she's like smart and pretty and cunning and resilient. And these are all traits that James like respects in himself as well as others. So he thinks she's just really cool. And since James really likes her, he can't bring himself to like do something that will particularly harm her on purpose, especially in this case, because he's supposed to be like using her for information. And he's like, well, I have to, that's part of my job, but I don't have to do it in a way that's gonna like break her heart. Like, I'm not gonna do that to her. So he's kind of walking this fine line here about trying to do his job and also be respectful to Tiffany. So James, he escorts her back to her hotel to, you know, walk her up to her door, and she kisses him and she's like, I don't want anything bad to happen to you, because she genuinely likes James back. But mind you, she has had no contact with men since 16. She has like rebuffed any advances any man has ever made at her. James starts to kiss her back and she like, nope, slams the door in his face. So he's like, duly noted. And James just leaves. So it's Sunday and Felix comes and picks up James at the hotel so they can go on their boys trip. And Felix has a Studebaker, which it's a kind of a rare car here because basically it's a Studebaker with a Cadillac engine. So, you know, they're like fucking around with it. Like James is watching for speed cops and like Felix is like, how fast can this go? They're being broy about it. And they have this fun little road trip up to Saratoga. And once they get into town, they part ways because it's not really safe for them to be seen with each other, at least in daytime and in locations where they wouldn't naturally run into each other. But they do make plans to like meet up at nighttime or like at the racetrack where it would be a normal instance for two people to be at the same place at the same time. So James, he just kind of wanders around idly. Mind you, the race is on Tuesday. It's Sunday. Like, he has like 2 days to kill basically. So he wanders around, he gets some food, he watches people, he goes and looks at the horses. It's just like, there's a lot of James wandering around in this book. However, Felix, he gets to work immediately because his whole case here is the horses. So Felix puts his plan into motion here, where basically he's kind of like blackmailing slash paying this, the mob's jockey for the horse to double cross the mob and take Felix's money for doing so, but purposely lose the race by getting like unintentionally disqualified. So, you know, hopefully the mob won't kill him for doing that, because the goal here isn't to get the jockey killed. Mind you, it's the mob. They've killed people for less, so I don't really know why they think this is gonna work well. Felix, he gives James like a envelope with $2,000 in it that he is supposed to give to the jockey later on at a spa. There's like a little mud bath spa thing in Saratoga that the jockeys all go to after their races. So if he loses correctly, he gets the money. So now it's time for the big race. The race goes off. The fixed horse and that jockey win the race. However, they manage to clip another horse along the way, so they get disqualified. This jockey has done exactly what he needed to do to get the $2,000. James is like, all right, spa time, let's go. So he goes over to the spa and he's getting like a hot mud bath. Basically, he's just boiling mud that just sit in. I don't really understand the science behind it. And he's in the bathtub next to the jockey. And then like these two random thugs like burst into the room. Like, one's a big guy, one's a skinny guy, and they're both wearing black hoods. And, you know, they're threatening the jockey. Obviously, they're going to threaten the jockey. He lost the race. What the bad guys do, the thugs, they grab like a bucket of super boiling mud and they literally pour it over the guy's face. And then, you know, the thugs leave after that, and all the attendants have to like get into motion really quick to get him out of the tub and get the mud off his face so his eyes don't boil. Oh my God. So after the whole mudroom debacle, James, he's back at his hotel room. He's calling up Shady Tree because, you know, his job is to get back into the pipeline here and see where it ends. He's like, Shady, that horse you told me to bet on did not pay off. How am I supposed to get my $5,000? So Shady tells him, okay, this is what you're going to do now. You're going to go over to Las Vegas, right? And you're going to check into the Tiara Hotel, which is owned by the Spangled Mob, by the way. And wait a couple days, and then at a specific time, you're going to go to a very specific blackjack table. You're going to bet that $1,000, and then you're definitely going to win $5,000 off of that bet. You're good. So next, Felix comes over and like James fills Felix in on everything about the mudroom, about those two thugs, and like he didn't see their faces because they were wearing hoods, but he has other, you know, identifying features he saw. And Felix can identify those guys because he knows that they're Wint and Kid, and they're known assassins for the mob and also allegedly boyfriends. Felix is also going to make a call and get James set up with a guy that he trusts in Las Vegas named Ernie Curio. And he's related to the Pinkertons. I don't think he's a full agent, but he's like an informant / works with them sometimes. James is like, thank you, I appreciate that. But just so you know, Felix, like, I've rather taken against this mob, which is like the most polite British way of saying I hate their fucking guts and I'm going to murder all of them. Because basically James, like this whole thing with the mud bath really rubbed him the wrong way. Like if they just beat the guy up a little bit, like he would have understood, but like the boiling mud in someone's face is just plain mean. So James is like, I've taken against them quite a bit. And Felix, being a true blue bro for James, is like basically like, I'll bring the shovel. Essentially, he's like, okay, well, I mean, I'll clean up whatever calamity you get yourself into the best I can. Like, he's just like, I get it, bro. Like, I'm there. So I love their friendship. So at this point, their cases have like moved apart from each other. You know, Felix has to go back to his horse doping case. James has to get on a plane to go to Las Vegas and continue on the pipeline. So they part ways. James, he goes to Las Vegas. Again, everything goes very smoothly. He just got on a plane and took a flight over. Nothing weird happens. And he gets to the airport. He's picked up by Ernie Curio, who is like a taxi driver. And they basically make a plan that James is like, you know, an eccentric limey, and he is gonna pay this taxi driver $50 a day just to stay at the hotel and be like his personal taxi. So that's gonna allow Ernie to like stay around the hotel just in case James needs him and not raise any suspicions. And then again, we have a whole montage of James just wandering around the casino, taking naps, like complaining about, you know, the general American cuisine, and also just being disgusted by the mob. He just thinks they're a bunch of assholes. So it's just like James wandering around and thinking how much he hates the mob for like a whole chapter. There's like several chapters of James just wandering around this book. But after all that wandering, it's finally time for his perfect blackjack game. So he goes over to the designated blackjack table at the designated time. And guess who the blackjack dealer is? One Miss Tiffany Case. So she's dealing cards and she's like shuffling them in a way, and that's definitely like a card sharp kind of thing. And James, also a card sharp, he learned how to cheat properly. He's been on so many gambling cases where he had to cheat. So he sees what she's doing and he's just like, oh wow, you're so cool. Like he's just really taking with Tiffany. And like Tiffany knows that James knows what she's doing, and they're kind of having like a, you know, a private moment between them where they both know, like, this is fucked up, right? It's kind of a fun scene. So, you know, she deals cards and everything, and it's like a perfect, he wins every hand and gets his $5,000. The whole thing takes about 5 minutes. And so he gets up from the table and he leaves. He doesn't want to start a scene and get like Tiffany into trouble or anything, so he leaves. You know what? James, in his own words, has rather taken against the mob, so he's in a mood to kind of stick it to him. So he's like, I got $5,000. Well, I'm gonna try my luck at roulette. So he goes to the roulette table and he just starts betting, and he keeps winning at roulette. Like, he has like quadrupled his payout to about $20,000 at this point, and he's like, you know what, I think I'm good at 20. Like, I don't want to like overstep here. But basically he's just robbing them now, and the mob is not happy about this. They don't want people winning money in the casino, and James is like so now that James is done, you know, poking the bear to prove his point here, he goes back up to his hotel, he goes to bed, and literally nothing happens. Nothing suspicious, and like James just wanders around some more because nothing's happening. So now it's the next day, and James is kind of bored wandering around, not doing anything, so he goes out to the taxi, literally just to hang out with Ernie. He's like, well, I like you, Ernie, let's go like drive around and talk. And everything's going okay for a little bit, like they're hanging out in the car, and then Ernie's like, hey James, like, I don't want to make a thing out of this, but like 3 cars are tailing us. Like, they're not even being inconspicuous about it. Like, they're way tailing us. And James is like, oh shit, you're right. Okay, Ernie, just let me out here. I don't want to get you into trouble. And Ernie's like, bitch, please, I'm not letting you out in the street. You're a bro now. Like, I'm down to like outrun him. Are you down? And James is like, all right, buckle up. And then we have a huge high-speed chase. Like, it's hard to like describe it in a video because it's so visual, even if it's in the book and there's no pictures or anything. But just picture a big high-speed chase with like close calls, car crashes, explosions, you know, lots of like hails of bullets or firing guns at each other. They're racing down the road, trying to like do fancy car stuff, and like cars flip over and shit. It's like a whole thing. So now that the first 2 cars are gone out of the 3 that were trailing them, they end up pulling over for a second. And James, he hops up to the front seat. He's like, Ernie, you're doing great. And he notices Ernie has been shot, like here, like upper chest arm area. So it's not like something he's like actively dying from, but he's still shot. And James really likes Ernie. And James gets very upset when people hurt people that he likes. Like when Felix got hurt in book 2, like James turned into a psychopath and like killed everyone. And the same thing is kind of happening here, where he's like, you're hurt, they're all gonna have to die. Like, he just kind of goes into assassin mode. However, Ernie, he's a trooper here, and he's like, James, you've got to drive, I'm shot. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna outrun that 3rd car because it's still after us, and then like after we outrun them and we lose them, you can take me over to the hospital. So their grand plan here is that they're gonna pull off the road real quick into a drive-in movie theater and just park around all the other cars and like blend in. And it's the dumbest plan I have ever heard. Like, I mean, first of all, they're in a taxi. It's not a normal car. And secondly, all of the windows are smashed. Like, the bumpers are like not even attached anymore. It looks like it's been in several car accidents, and it's full of bullet holes. Like, how inconspicuous do you think you're going to be? And like, obviously this whole ploy here doesn't work for them. The mobsters find them like immediately. Because the next thing James knows is that there's 2 guys on either side of the car with guns, and they're like, hey, get out the car, we're gonna kill your friend. So James, he goes with them so they don't hurt Ernie. However, they do knock Ernie out. And James is now just incandescently angry about this. He's like, how dare you hurt my friend again? So he starts doing assassin math real quick, like, how fast can I get to my Beretta and kill these 2 guys? I don't care, I'm in the middle of a drive-in movie theater and there's a lot of witnesses. I will murder them both right now. And then he realizes like his assassin math isn't mathing. There's no way he's gonna like make that work for him. So he has to just like swallow down his assassin urge and just go with these guys. So the 2 mobsters, they take James over to this place called Spectreville. No relation to Spectre, it's just called Spectreville. And it's basically like an old west ghost town that Serafimo Spang bought because he's like obsessed with cowboys in like the Wild West and stuff. So he bought a whole Wild West ghost town so he can dress up and play cowboys with his friends. I am not even joking. Like, that's literally why he bought it. He's a grown-ass man, leader of the mafia, playing cowboys with his friends. It's kind of silly at this point. It gets like kind of campy here. Like they're just out there living their Westworld fantasy. And also the biggest, baddest mob in the world, apparently. Like these two things go together. And like, you know what? I forgot to mention, he even doubled down on this whole like Wild West experience because he bought like an old Victorian like train. So it's like a full-on like Wild West train, and he uses it just to go to like the next town over and back with his buddies. Like he just like rides his little train so he can play cowboys. It's so bizarre. So the two mobsters, they grab James, they bring him into the saloon, and now the math starts working in James' favor. So James proceeds to beat the snot out of these two guys, just like mainly because fuck you, this is payback for Ernie. So after the big fight, you know, James, he's like, like just breathing hard. And then all of a sudden he hears someone just like, in the room, and he turns around and there's like a whole bunch of people. I don't know how he missed him. James is not like at his top spy game at this moment. James, he takes note of who's here, and there's a bunch of random guys dressed up like cowboys. There's Tiffany Case, she's there. She's dressed up like a cowgirl. And then who else is there? One Serafimo Spang. He's also in the room, the big guy. A fresh group of thugs grab James and they take him over to the train. And he gets in the train, and there's Serafino, and he's sitting there with Tiffany. Tiffany's there, obviously looking a bit frightened, you know, for James. So James is also like, oh no, Tiffany's frightened. I'm very upset right now. And Serafimo is like, hey, James, who the fuck are you? Because guess what? I got a wire message from like my mystery informant in England, ABC, who told me like the real Peter Franks is in police custody and we've never met him before. I don't know who the fuck you are. You act a whole lot like a cop or a private detective. Like, who are you working for? We basically know that you're up to something right now and we're not happy about it. And it's right about now that James does his assassin math one more time and realizes this is the well shit, this is gonna suck moment. And so Serafino, he brings in Wint and Kid. Again, they're still wearing those black hoods. And he's like, all right, guys, I want you to give them a Brooklyn stomping, an 80%er. So, oh my gosh, that means you're basically just gonna like kick him to death, but only like 80% of the way. They just fade to black at this moment. We don't like witness the torture here. And the story picks up again sometimes later when Tiffany is like trying to wake up James. So James kind of comes back to consciousness and he sees Tiffany and he's really bad off. Like, you know, he just got like super kicked for like a while. So he can't really even seem to get himself up. Like he can't even stand, he can't move. He's just like tenderized meat at this point. But then like, you know, his brain starts like actually functioning again. He's like, oh wait, Tiffany's here. I gotta protect Tiffany. And also the fucking mob is here. I fucking hate the mob. He just starts getting up finally. He manages to like get up to his feet rather clumsily, but mind you, he's running on pure spite at this point. So Tiffany is going to help James escape because she likes him. She doesn't want anything bad to happen to him. So Tiffany helps him off the train and they make their way over to like this handcar that she had set up. And she had already grabbed James's gun and she had filled the handcar with gas. And like she also shifted the rails, so they're definitely going the right direction towards the next town over. And James is like, oh shit, you did all of this while I was unconscious? I am impressed. So James, he just starts a quick fire as a distraction. So, you know, they can escape, they can like start up the handrail because it's gonna be noisy. So there's a big fire and they start up the handcar, they're off. They're just like booking it as fast as this little car will go, which is probably like 30 miles an hour max. And you know what? Things go well. Things go smoothly so far. About for at least an hour, they're just chugging along on the tracks, not doing anything. The fire is over there. They're dealing with that. And then all of a sudden, you know, James, he's starting to feel like more vibrations on the tracks than normal. So he kind of like looks up because mind you, he's just like a heap on the floor here. Tiffany is doing all of the driving. James can barely walk. So he's just like looking over and then he looks and he sees like a spotlight on the tracks in the distance, and he's feeling more vibrations. So he realizes, oh shit, they got in their train and they're chasing us on a train. So everything's about to go to shit real quick, because not only are they being chased by a much bigger and faster train, they run out of gas, because of course they do. Of course they would run out of gas right now. So James, he's like, oh shit, I gotta come up with a plan. Okay, well, there's these mountains over there. Maybe we can run to the mountains and like hide, and like we're gonna do that. And Tiffany comes up with a much better plan. She's like, James, like there's like 50 feet in front of us. We can just switch the railway point and put them on the wrong track. Like, why don't we just do that? Because the opposite track they're not supposed to be on is a dead end. Like literally a dead end, because they will crash into the side of a freaking mountain. And James is like, you know what, Tiffany, your idea is much better than mine. Let's do your idea. That's a good one. So they go over there, they end up switching the railway points, and James is like, okay, but we still have to take care of them first and make sure like we're safe. So he gets like Tiffany back in the handcar on the rails over there. He like pushes it further away so she'll be like safe. And he gets out. And this is my favorite sequence of the whole book. It's so tense and you're just on the edge of your seat and you need to know what happens next. It's exciting to read. So James, he's standing there, mind you, beat to shit. And he has his gun. He's like, how many bullets do we have? 4? All right, I gotta make these count. So he's just standing there waiting for the train to get close enough that he can see people on it. And so the train starts coming around the bend, and he starts hearing pops and like things hitting the ground next to him, and he's being shot at. Mind you, no cover, nothing he can do about it besides just let people shoot at him and hope they miss. However, they're bad guys, so of course they're gonna have bad guy aim, and they'll never hit James. Like, he's fine, they just keep firing and missing. James sees Serafimo, who's like, you know, driving the train, or like, I don't know, conducting it. I don't really know how you drive a train, but anyway, he's like at the controls. And he sees him, and he waited to the perfect moment where he had a good shot, and he fires all 4 of his bullets into Serafimo Spang whilst on a moving train. So Serafimo's like, bleh, and he's dead. So James is like, yeah, stuck it to the mob. And then the train keeps going off on the wrong track, and he just watches it go, and then all of a sudden you hear a big boom, and then psh, it explodes. There's a train explosion in here. It's so intense to read, and so, oh my gosh, I wish they would do that on film. It'd be so good. Okay, so now that all the bad guys have been taken care of, they're literally exploded into a mountain. James and Tiffany can get working on the problem they still have, which is that they're out in the middle of the desert with no transportation or water or anything. Like, they gotta find their way to civilization, and they're not near any part of it. So that means they're gonna have to walk. And mind you, James, he mustered up the strength he needed to like shoot at a moving train, but like realistically, he is beat to shit. He can barely walk. So it's up to Tiffany really to get them out of this jam that they're in. So Tiffany, you know, like puts his arm over her shoulder, helping him walk, and like in a few hours of walking, she does manage to lead them back to the road, where like hopefully a car will come. They're just sitting there in the sun. James is just like in the dirt. He can't even walk anymore. He's just laying in the dirt. So she's just like trying to comfort him. And finally, she starts seeing a car come down the road. So she like jumps out, is like, help. And like, guess who's in the car on the road? Felix Leiter. Oh my gosh, he always shows up when James needs him. Like, he has the best timing. I love Felix. He's my favorite character. So apparently what had happened here is that Felix, he couldn't get a hold of James in Las Vegas. So he's like, I think something's up. So he calls Ernie, and Ernie's wife answers the phone. He's like, he's in the goddamn hospital. I'm like freaking out. And he's like, oh, well, shit hit the fan. Okay. If they've got Ernie and he's in the hospital, they probably took James to Spectreville, because everyone knows about Spectreville. So he starts going out to Spectreville, and he's like, well, that's exploded. The whole thing's on fire. So James had to have been here. I guess I'm just gonna keep driving to the next city over and see if I can find him. And then along the way, he happened upon James on the road. So like everything just kind of happened in a perfect sequence for like them to meet at that point. So they get in the car, and Felix takes them across state lines. That's basically the step 1, get out of Nevada, because the mob is very strong there. So they cross over the California border. They go to Los Angeles. And that was really cool because James Bond is like never in Los Angeles. So there's like a whole scene where he's at the Beverly Hotel and stuff, which is a real hotel. And they get seen by doctors, you know, because James is like tenderized meat at this point. He at least has internal bleeding. So he gets checked out, he's all bandaged up, and he's like, oh, I feel a little bit better now. So Felix starts calling in some favors with like the CIA and the Pinkertons, and basically he sets it all up to get James and Tiffany out of the country. So he gets them on a plane to New York. When they get to New York, they're gonna get picked up by like people from the CIA and like Pinkerton and stuff, and to protect them, and then they're gonna get on a boat to go to England. That's the plan. And like Felix took care of all of that with like this oh shucks like Texas attitude that he has, and he didn't even ask for anything in return. He's just like, all right, bye James, I'll see you later. He doesn't even like say like you're welcome or anything. He just did it because they're bros. And Tiffany tells James, she's like, you have a really great friend. And James, he's like, yeah, he's all right. Which again is like the polite British way of saying he is my best friend in the world and I will die for him. So anyway, James and Tiffany, they get on the plane in Los Angeles. They fly over to New York. They get picked up by the CIA and the Pinkertons. That part goes smoothly. Nothing to report there. They get on the boat later that day and everything goes smooth there, except here's where the problem starts. The mob has a lot of connections all over the place. Someone saw them get on the boat. They call up the mob. They're like, hey, these guys are on the boat. So they send a couple guys over. Guess who it is? Wint and Kid, those two assassins, back at it again. So now James and Tiffany are on the boat, and Wint and Kid are on the boat. James and Tiffany don't know there's assassins on the boat after them. Shit's about to get real. Dun dun dun. Danger time. But in the meantime, James and Tiffany, they kind of grow closer to each other. They go out on dates, and James, you know, he really does quite like Tiffany a lot. Like, he's like, I think I'm almost all the way in love with her. Like, he comes to admit this to himself. But he also is, you know, self-aware enough to know that, like, he's probably not good for her because, like, he's a secret agent for Pete's sake. Like, obviously, his job alone is not, you know, conducive to having, you know, lasting relationships. And also, you know, Tiffany has been hurt before. Does James have like the emotional capacity to help her with that? Does he want to do that long term? Like, he's really thinking about this. He's like, what would life be like if we married each other? Like, what would happen realistically? But besides, you know, complications of the future, it doesn't stop them from, you know, catching real feels for each other. They end up being intimate with each other, which is a big deal for Tiffany. She hasn't been with any men since, you know, the incident when she was 16. So she trusts James and like it's a whole thing. And it's actually handled really well in the book, I think, because it's a fade to black moment. It's not very graphic or anything, but James, he's like, he takes it very slow with her. He doesn't like jump into like full force like everything. He takes it very slow, and I'm like, okay, good for you, James. So it's the next morning and James wakes up. He's alone in bed. Tiffany went back to her room after they were intimate, and he wakes up and he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess breakfast. And he's just kind of getting ready for the day, and he gets a knock on his door, and it's a guy with like an urgent message from Universal Exports, which is like the code name for like the Ministry M, the whole deal. The message says that, hey, guess what? There's known assassins on the boat. We don't know who they are, but they're on the boat, and they're being paid by the remaining Spang brother to kill Tiffany. And James is like, oh, fuck no. Like, he's very upset, so he starts thinking really hard. He's like, who could they be? And then he starts remembering, like, he saw these two kind of suspicious American men around the boat several times, and he never recognized them because he had never actually seen their faces before, because Wint and Kid had always worn black hoods. So he's like, oh shit, it's them, I know it. He runs over to Tiffany's cabin. Uh-oh, problem is she's already gone. Like, there's stuff thrown around. Obviously there was a struggle, and he's like, oh no. So he's like really freaking out about it. He's like, she could be dead. Oh no. So he starts like thinking of like, okay, where's his registry? So he goes and looks at the registry. He finds out which rooms, like Winter and Kidrick, like they didn't really like try to disguise their names that much. And he figures out what rooms they have. So he's like, all right, gotta go after them, but I need the element of surprise here. And again, we get another very tense action scene where James, he's like ripping the sheets up to make a rope because he's going out the porthole of his cabin, because the portholes for their rooms are like a couple floors below and like 2 over. So he's like, I'm gonna climb down the window over to their portholes and go in that way to surprise them. It's horrifying because he's just dangling over the open sea. He's like, this rope could break. It's literally made out of sheets. I don't know what I'm doing here. He just goes down his rope, very tense, and he starts hearing like Tiffany and like sounds of struggle, and he's like, oh shit. So he flings himself through the window, kind of like, you know, like Mission Impossible 4, like, just swing at the window. And he manages to get in through the porthole, already has his gun out, and he's like, stop it. He's in full assassin mode right now. When he's in that assassin mode in the books, it's really chilling to read sometimes because he has no human emotions. Like, he just shuts them off, and he is like just a killing machine. So even though he is in full assassin mode right now, he still manages to like tell Tiffany to get up and go into the bathroom and lay down in the tub to like protect her from any stray bullets and to make sure she doesn't see what he's about to do. And then they kind of have a bit of a gunfight here. It's not much of a gunfight, frankly, because basically like Kid, he tries to pull a gun real quick, but James is faster and he kills Kid. And then like Wint trips over a chair and he's trying to grab a gun, but he's like, no. And so he leaves the gun, but he ends up pulling a throwing knife. He throws the knife at James at the same time James fires a gun at him, and they both get hit. Like, mind you, Wint dead. James is much better aim. James, he's been stabbed. He got hit by the throwing knife, like, in the ribs. Like, he has to pull the knife out of his chest. Like, yikes. So now that those two are dead, he's like, all right, I gotta go get Tiffany. So he's, like, knocking on the door. Mind you, bleeding a lot. So he's like, Tiffany, it's me. Open the door. And so she lets him in, and like he's bleeding everywhere, and she's like, oh my god, why are you bleeding? So she like ripping towels, and she's like bandaging up his chest so like, you know, it stops bleeding everywhere. And James is like, all right, Tiffany, I want you to go back to my room. Go to my room right now and lock the door. I gotta do some shit. And like Tiffany's like, okay. So Tiffany leaves, he gets her out of there. So basically he like sets up the room again to make it look like it was a murder-suicide. And he like wipes down all the fingerprints of like Tiffany and him around the room. And he's like, okay, well, this is the best it's gonna get. It's at least that it will hold up long enough for the cops to investigate when we get to port. We can get off the boat before anyone notices. And it works out. They get back to London, they get off the boat, and James actually moves Tiffany into his apartment. This is kind of a big deal. He hasn't lived with a romantic partner before, but James still has to finish the case. So Tiffany moves in. James, he gets on a plane. He goes over to Africa, Sierra Leone, where the pipeline starts. We got to close down the rest of the pipeline. So James and a bunch of like the military guys are there, and they're lying in wait, waiting for like this helicopter to fly in and pick up the diamonds from the courier. And the pilot turns out to be Jack Spang, who is also ABC, the secret informant that they had the whole book, and it was supposed to be a mystery, but it really wasn't that good of a mystery. Whatever. Jack Spang / ABC gets off the plane, tells the courier, pipeline's over, we're shutting it down. He takes the diamonds from the courier, kills the courier, gets in his little helicopter, and that's when the military is like, freeze! And he's like, nope. And he like takes off in the helicopter. So James, he's like firing like an artillery weapon, and he manages to shoot down the helicopter, and it's like, it takes a long time to crash. It's just like spiraling out of control and dipping on fire. And eventually it does crash and just, you know, explodes. Like, there's so many explosions in this book, really. So that's that. The whole diamond pipeline is officially shut down. There's no one left to run it. And James kind of reflects on that for a little bit, and about the permanence of things, because out of that, you know, whole mangled heap of a helicopter crash, the only thing that's going to survive it are the diamonds. So like, diamonds are forever. Get it? And he starts thinking about just his whole place in this. He had to kill 6 people during this mission to close down this pipeline, and he had 0 enjoyment out of any of it, which is kind of a little different for James. It's not that he's ever enjoyed being an assassin, but he's actively acknowledging that like being an assassin doesn't bring him any type of joy. He doesn't really feel much of anything about it. He's just the guy who kills worse guys. and that's his whole job. And James is very introspective throughout the whole series about like, why do I do what I do? Like, why? So basically, in the end, his life reads much better than it actually lives. And that's the end of Diamonds Are Forever. So yeah, I really think this is an underrated book of the series. I think mainly people don't like it because, like I was saying, there are several instances where James is literally just wandering around doing nothing. There are some parts of the book that don't function as anything more than just like, let me explain the scenery. But there are some of the best action sequences in this. Like, so many explosions, it feels very cinematic while you're reading it. You're like, oh my gosh, that train exploded, that helicopter exploded, that car exploded, everything exploded. Like, it's very action-packed and tense. And like, I really like Tiffany and James and his like thought pattern about what a relationship is actually like for him. It has the, you know, the moody book about feelings element and also explosions. So it's kind of a good marriage between those two ideas. But I think it's an underrated hit of the series because not a lot of people really love this book, but like, I think it's really good. All right, so on that note, let me know in the comments down below, what's another underrated book of a series that a lot of people don't like, but you think is really good? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. And if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And if you want cool exclusive content, including early access to videos and a book club, you can consider becoming a channel member or a patron. Links for that are in the description down below. And on that note, I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.